Some people don't feel their feelings when they happen. They feel them later, in traffic or staring at the ceiling. By then, the moment is gone. The boundary stayed unsaid. The apology came too fast, and the body is left carrying the truth. That can make you feel disconnected from yourself, but often it started as an intelligent way to survive. Some children learn early that feeling in real time is risky. The room is too full of someone else's stress, anger, or need. So they become careful before they become known. They learn to scan first and feel later. Years later, that habit can look like maturity. Calm, dependable, never too much. But underneath, something else is happening. The reaction is delayed because the self was delayed. You see it when someone asks, "Are you okay?" and your mind goes blank. Your system hasn't caught up yet. Or when you say yes too quickly, then feel heavy afterward. The truth arrives late, after the useful version of you already answered. Many adults live this way. They think they're indecisive, flat, or bad at communication. What they're often carrying is a gap between the event and the feeling. A gap built when quick honesty came with a cost. Maybe home rewarded composure more than truth. Maybe sadness was inconvenient, anger disrespectful, and fear something to hide. Maybe nobody helped you notice yourself. They only taught you how to stay manageable. So now you function first and understand later. You get through the meeting, the dinner, the phone call, and then the crash comes. One text tightens your chest and you don't know why. A simple favor feels strangely expensive. This delay can shape relationships. You forgive too early and understand you're hurt after the other person thinks everything is fine. Actually, that bothered me. No, I wasn't comfortable with that. I needed you to notice. But the moment to say it feels gone, so the feeling gets stored instead of spoken. This is one quiet cost of growing up emotionally unseen. You become excellent at adaptation and underdeveloped in recognition. Recognition is not simple. It means knowing what you feel while it is happening, before it hardens into resentment or exhaustion. That ability usually forms in relationship. A child notices themselves by being noticed. When a parent helps name experience, the child builds an inner map. You're scared, disappointed, tired, hurt. Without that mirroring, feelings stay blurry. The body reacts, but the mind has no clear label. So later in life, you can be capable on the outside and untranslated on the inside. Functional, but delayed. This gets stronger if you had to grow up too soon. If adults leaned on you or needed you to stay steady. Children in that role don't get room for messy reactions. They learn that usefulness is safety. So they become the one who handles things, the one who doesn't complain, doesn't add stress, doesn't need much. That child often becomes the adult who can organize everyone's crisis. But when asked what they want, they say, "I don't know." Not because desire is absent, because desire was never the urgent thing. Urgent was mood management. Urgent was staying ahead of tension. When that becomes automatic, your own feelings move to the back of the line. Not gone, just postponed. And postponed feelings don't disappear. They collect interest. That's why some people don't cry during the breakup. They cry when the apartment finally gets quiet. The same thing happens with anger. In real time, it can feel almost inaccessible. You stay reasonable and explain the other person's behavior to yourself. Then later, the anger arrives with perfect clarity. But delayed anger is often old training. If anger once threatened connection, your system learned to hide it until danger passed. Sadness can go underground too, especially if sadness was met with impatience or a blank emotional shrug. Some children learn not that sadness is wrong, but that it changes nothing. So they stop showing it before they stop feeling it. Then there's guilt, which often arrives faster than anything else. Guilt becomes the first language because it protected attachment. Before you can feel hurt, you feel guilty for having the hurt. Before you can feel anger, you feel bad for making life harder. That is why a boundary can feel morally wrong even when it is reasonable. The body reads self-protection as possible disconnection. You say, "I can't do that tonight," and spend the evening uneasy, not because the boundary was cruel, but because old alarms went off. This is also why rest can feel strangely threatening. When worth formed around usefulness, stillness has nowhere easy to land. You sit down, and instead of relief, guilt walks in. The body asks who you are if you are not anticipating someone else. For people like this, emotional clarity often disappears in ordinary moments. A joke crosses a line, a boss adds one more task, a partner asks for more closeness. Nothing looks catastrophic from the outside. But inside, your system is doing calculations your awareness hasn't translated yet. Can I say no without becoming difficult? Can I look hurt without seeming needy? Can I need something without owing something? Those questions often live below words. They show up as hesitation, smiling too quickly, laughing at what hurt, or going quiet when something matters. That quiet gets mistaken for ease. You may even believe you're just bad at emotions. But many emotionally delayed adults are not lacking depth. They have too much depth without enough permission. Their feelings are real, but access has been trained to wait. That is why clarity can arrive while folding laundry or washing dishes. The hands are busy, and the system finally stops defending. You said nothing, realize you weren't overwhelmed, you were hurt. Or you weren't lazy, you were exhausted and scared to admit how much help you needed. Or you weren't overthinking that date. Your body noticed something your politeness kept trying to erase. This is where many people start mistrusting themselves. They think if I didn't know in the moment, maybe it wasn't real. But slowness does not make a feeling false. Delay is not dishonesty. In many cases, delay is what happens when awareness has to move through years of caution. The feeling was there, access wasn't. And the cost isn't only internal, it changes how life gets built. You can stay in jobs that drain you because you realize too late that every day feels heavy. You can stay in friendships that leave you small because discomfort took months to name. You can date people who like your calm because they mistake your pause for endless patience. Meanwhile, unmet feelings stack quietly in the background. You can become the person everyone trusts in an emergency and still feel absent from your own life. That absence hurts in a private way, not like chaos, but like a low, steady distance from yourself. You may look composed in every room and still feel unseen in every room, because being seen requires showing something before you've fully processed it. That can feel impossible if early life taught you to speak only once you're sure, only once you've edited out the risk. But real intimacy doesn't always wait for perfect clarity. Sometimes it begins with, something in me is tightening, and I need a second. A lot of adults were never taught that partial honesty counts. They think feelings must arrive fully organized before they can be spoken. So they stay silent until the evidence is airtight. By then, many important moments have passed. This is not a character flaw. It is what happens when emotional accuracy had to compete with emotional safety. The problem is that childhood solutions don't retire on their own. They keep working long after the emergency is gone. So the adult body still pauses before truth. It still checks the room before checking the heart. That pause can feel so normal you barely notice it. You just call yourself chill, thoughtful, private, independent, low drama. Sometimes those words are partly true, but sometimes they are polished names for old self-silencing. There was a difference between peace and practiced disappearance. There was a difference between emotional control and emotional exile. One brings steadiness. The other erases your signals until you only notice yourself in the aftermath. That aftermath can look like sudden tears over something small, or irritation that seems bigger than the moment. Usually, the moment is not small. It is the first safe moment after many unsafe ones. This is why emotionally delayed adults often feel embarrassed by their own reactions. They judge the timing instead of respecting the backlog. But the backlog matters. The nervous system keeps records even when language is late. It remembers the pause before asking for help. It remembers the look on someone's face when your needs once made life harder. None of this means you are broken. It means your inner life learned to come through a guarded doorway. The work now is not becoming more dramatic. It is becoming more immediate. Not giant emotional performances. Just noticing sooner when your chest drops, your stomach tightens, or your yes feels false. A lot can change in that earlier second. That is where self-trust starts rebuilding. You catch the joke that didn't feel good before you laugh it off. You hear the fatigue in your own voice before agreeing again. You notice the urge to explain someone else's behavior before noticing your own pain. And you gently reverse the order. First, what happened in me? Then, what story am I telling about them? That shift can feel unfamiliar. People who learn to monitor others before themselves often experience self-attention as selfishness. But self-attention is not selfish when it repairs neglect. It is how an inner life becomes livable. It is how you stop abandoning yourself in polite ways. It is how delayed feelings start arriving closer to the moment that created them. And when they do, life gets more honest. Not easier all at once, but truer. You may disappoint people who benefited from your silence. You may also feel relief in places that used to feel numb. Because being loved for your usefulness is not the same as being loved for your full presence. One feels earned, the other feels safe. So when kindness makes you suspicious, or rest makes you restless, pause before judging yourself. Those reactions are often the echo, not the truth. The echo says be careful. The truth may be quieter. You were not built to ignore yourself, you were trained to. Training can feel permanent because it lives in timing. In how fast you apologize, how long you wait, and how quickly you dismiss your own reaction. But timing can change, slowly, awkwardly, honestly. Sometimes it starts with, give me a second. I need to check in with myself. Sometimes it starts with, I think that upset me more than I realized. Sometimes it starts alone in a parked car. You stop calling yourself too sensitive and start asking what the sensitivity noticed. That question opens a different life, one where your feelings are not late guests but early information. Not commands, not verdicts, just information, a signal that something mattered, crossed a line, felt good or felt off. When you treat feelings as information instead of inconvenience, your inner world becomes more legible. The fog doesn't vanish, but it thins. Because a person who can feel in time can choose in time. They can speak before resentment hardens, rest before collapse, and leave before emptiness becomes identity. They don't need a breakdown to prove something was too much. They don't need pain to become dramatic before it becomes valid. That may be one of the deepest losses of emotional neglect. You learn to trust extremes because subtler signals were never welcomed. So part of adulthood is learning to respect the whisper, the small no, the early ache, the almost invisible flinch. They appear before their performance returns. Before politeness edits the truth, before old roles say just handle it. Maybe that is the real grief here. So many capable adults were praised for a strength that required leaving themselves behind. They were called mature when they were actually emotionally alone. They were called easy when they were self-erasing. They were admired for not needing much. No one asked what it cost them to seem that way. So if you often don't know what you feel until it's too late, do not read that as emptiness. Read it as history. A history of watching first. A history of adjusting fast and making yourself understandable to others before yourself. That history deserves compassion, but not lifelong control. It explains the pattern without having to define your future. You are allowed to know sooner now. You are allowed to pause in the middle of a conversation and find your place inside it. You are allowed to need a minute before answering. You are allowed to realize that enduring is different from being okay. You are allowed to outgrow the version of strength that kept you unreadable, even if people liked you better that way. Because the goal is not to become harder to love. It is to become harder to abandon, especially by yourself. Maybe that is what maturity really looks like. Not perfect communication and not instant emotional clarity. Maybe it looks like noticing one feeling a little earlier, naming one truth before it turns into exhaustion. Maybe it looks like staying with yourself a few seconds longer than you used to. For some people, that is a whole new inheritance. It means the adult you are is finally meeting the child who had to wait.